Linda McAvan, Labour MEP for Yorkshire and the Humber. We now know how the British government plans to share out EU funding across the country from 2014 onwards. How does it look for Yorkshire?
It looks very bad. We're losing about 25% of the funding we should have had from the European Commission. And the government seems to have given it mainly to Scotland in advance of the referendum next year in Scotland. And I think this is outrageous.
So how much then in monetary terms does Yorkshire, South Yorkshire in particular, stand to lose?
Well, we're going to get about 180 million euros, and I reckon we should be getting something like double that amount of money in South Yorkshire, and a bit more for the whole region. The Humber's also losing out. And the only reason the government's saying is, oh well, we need to protect the devolved administrations who mustn't lose more than 5%. But in South Yorkshire, we're losing 50%, and that doesn't seem like a good reason to me.
And how can you explain that? You say the government is protecting the devolved regions. Why?
Well, I think it's because they want to give things to Scotland in advance of the referendum next year. But the European Commission has to sign off this money. The European Commission did a calculation of how much money the UK government should get for different regions, South Yorkshire and parts of North Lincolnshire, are transitional regions, so they should get more money than the average, and yet they're getting less money. So I'm asking the European Commission to have a look at this very closely and say, does this reflect how the money was allocated from Brussels in the first place?
Does the European Commission then have the right to intervene if it feels that it's necessary?
Yes, it's got to sign off these amounts because it has a transparent formula for how much money each country in the EU should get as a result of the EU budget deal. And there are different categories of regions. The poorest get more. The second tier is the transitional regions like South Yorkshire and parts of North Lincolnshire. And at the moment, they're not getting more. So why aren't they getting more per capita than, for example, richer parts? I mean, the GDP of South Yorkshire is 84% of the EU average. Scotland's 107%. Yet they're getting a lot more money than in Scotland than we are. And that just can't be right.
And what impact will that have on a practical level in somewhere like your constituency?
Well, many of the major regeneration projects, the job creating projects are funded at the moment by EU money. And once you get EU money, you also get allocated national funding to match it. So it's kind of double whammy. Losing the EU money means you lose national money as well. So I think it's a big cut for South Yorkshire. And it's one which the government has totally failed to explain to the people of our region. Why can Yorkshire lose so much money to give money to Scotland?
And, you know, if you were to look at, you mentioned Scotland, but if you were to look at Wales, for example, originally we were being told that Wales would stand to lose up to £400 million. They've lobbied hard and now they're looking to get, I think, £2 billion, up from £1.9 billion in the last round. How does that leave you feeling?
Well, lucky Wales that there's a referendum in Scotland next year and the government use Wales. They're going to give more money to all the devolved administrations. I think that's cover because they want really to top up the Scottish amounts. But there's no logical reason for it. I mean, I think Wales does need money. All the regions should get the money and the countries, the devolved administration that they have been given by a transparent formula. But what we've got is political interference in London deciding that they're going to give more money to certain areas. And even within the English regions, when I look at it, there are parts of the England much, much wealthier than South Yorkshire and the Humber who are getting a lot more money. Parts of, you know, the posher parts of England are getting more money than our regions. And I suppose I've been here before. I worked in the coalfield communities in the 1990s, and exactly the same thing happened. We won money from Brussels, then the government, the Tory government, tried to take it off us. And that's, I think, is happening again. We're seeing a repeat of history.
We've seen a lot of lobbying from the likes of Wales. We've seen the First Minister come over on several occasions. Do you think it's just the case that they've done a better job of making their case?
I think it's certainly true that the government got rid of the regional development agencies, so Yorkshire doesn't have a voice anymore, a single voice for our region. I think that's a mistake. Personally, I supported having regional government and a strong voice for our region. But the lack of the RDAs is a problem. It means each local authority has to have a specialist person following all these goings on. And that kind of person hasn't got the same clout as, you know, one single council leader hasn't got the same clout as the First Minister for Scotland.
So how optimistic do you feel that you will get a response to your letter to the Commissioner and that he will be prepared to look into this and perhaps intervene?
I'm confident we'll get a response. I'm hoping to have a meeting this week with the Commissioner. It affects other regions, Merseyside for example, so with colleagues from those regions affected. And we want a meeting with the Commissioner Hahn. We want to know his formula and what the difference was. And if the difference is big, I think the Commission should act. It acted before in the 1990s. The Commission at that time said if the government didn't sort out the problem, it would block the funding. And I think we should be looking at this again.